Queensbury, sat high on the hills between Bradford and Halifax, looking out to the Yorkshire Dales to the north, the Vale of York to the east, and the Pennine Hills to the west. It's said that Queensbury has the highest cricket field in all of England, and the highest school. What local folks do know is that it gets a bit nippy in the winter. That's one of the reasons I like it. Queensbury started life as just a few houses clustered around the roadside and was known as Causeway End. It was in 1740 that things began to change. George II was on the throne. Running the country was Sir Robert Walpole, widely accepted as being the first and longest serving British Prime Minister. Of more interest to our story is the completion of a turnpike road between Bradford and Halifax. At the top of the hill between the two towns, someone had the foresight to build the Queen's Head Inn. This natural and one suspects much welcome stopping point lent its name to the village that developed around it. The 1800s saw the rapid development of Queen's Head, and this was largely due to the influence and vision of one man. His name was John Foster. John Foster was born on the 6th of March 1798. His father, Jonas, was a local colliery owner. On the 16th of May 1820, John married Ruth Briggs. Ruth's father, Abraham, was a prominent landowner in the local area. Whether this was at the back of John's mind when he chose to marry Ruth, we will never know. What we do know is that the marriage did no harm at all to John's business ambitions. At the time, the factory system of cloth production was not established, so Foster employed hundreds of local residents to weave the cloth on hand looms in their cottages. In 1821, John Foster's oldest son, William, was born. Despite John having many other children, it seems as if William was the chosen one. At the tender age of 14, he was already involved in the business, and it's interesting to note that the business was always called John Foster and Son, rather than Sons. Things went well for John Foster, and in 1827 he built Prospect House, his family home, in the centre of Queen's Head. In 1834, Abraham, John's father-in-law, gave Foster some land known locally as Black Myers. It was here in 1835 that John Foster began work on his mill. The land was also the home of Dyke's farm, and it was this farm that gave the mill its name. Dyke mills were built at the height of the Industrial Revolution. Foster, realising that he had to move with the times, invested heavily in power looms and built gasworks to supply both the village and the mill. The mill even had its own fire service. At the same time, he began experimenting with new fabrics. Foster's pioneering use of alpaca and mohair was a commercial success, and at the Great Exhibition of 1851 he was awarded first prize for alpaca and mohair fabrics and the gold medal for yarns. The 26th of May 1863 was a significant date for the village. It was the day that the name of the village was changed to Queensbury. Quite why this name was chosen is lost in the midst of time. Certainly the name Fosterville was suggested, but ultimately rejected. The development of Dyke Mills brought increasing wealth to the Foster family, and in 1860 John Foster bought the palatial Hornby Castle in Lancashire, which he set about renovating. Hornby Castle became the family home, and he retired there prior to his death in 1879. The control of the business fell to John's son William, who himself died in 1884. Not content with owning just the one castle, the Foster family built another in Littlemore Park, just a short walk from the mill. It was built in 1891 for Herbert Anderton Foster, John Foster's grandson, who had become vice chair of the new board of directors. Sadly, Littlemore Castle stood for just 45 years and is now demolished. One of Queensbury's lost treasures. In the latter half of the 19th century, the Dyke Mills and John Foster's philanthropy were the dominant force in the village. 1891 saw the opening of Victoria Hall, named to recognise Queen Victoria's Jubilee in 1887. The building, entirely funded by the Foster family, served as a concert hall, social club, educational institute and recreation centre for the people of the village. To accommodate girls and young women who came to work at the mill from distant places, the Fosters built a 231-bed hostel with a dining room and furnished public rooms. The vast majority of building in Queensbury that took place at that time was either funded or sponsored by the Foster family. Some of this, such as the considerable investment in workers' housing, was for the benefit of the business. Others, such as sponsoring the building of Holy Trinity Church and Queenshead National School, now Russell Hall, reflected the more civic-minded thinking of industrialists of the time. Perhaps the most famous legacy of John Foster, himself a French horn player, lies in the world of music. In 1833, a new band, the Queenshead Band, was formed. By 1855, the band was on the brink of collapse. As the Halifax Courier and Guardian reported, Messrs John Foster and Son of Queenshead, having lately become acquainted with the depressed position of the band, determined to make an effort themselves to raise it up again. The Fosters provided new instruments, new uniforms and a practice room. The name of the band was changed to the Dyke Mills Band and they became the public face of the company. Today, the Dyke Band, they have dropped the word Mills from the name, are one of the oldest, most respected and famous brass bands in the world. They are still very much based in Queensbury and their rehearsal rooms and heritage centre lie in the heart of the village. John Foster and Son was now a private limited liability company, and the years from 1891 onwards were to see rapid development and growth. The whole mill became self-contained with all outside services brought in-house. The mill employed its own plumbers, joiners and basket makers, and even had its own fire brigade. Reservoirs were built around the mill to provide its own water supply. All this meant that every step of the manufacturing process was owned and managed by the company, which in turn brought increased efficiency and productivity. 1914 saw the onset of the First World War and the focus of the Dyke Mills became the provision of uniforms for the Allied forces. Further support of the war effort came with the woodworking and engineering departments of the mill being used by the Ministry of Munitions. To keep the mill running, many workers were granted reserved occupation status and as such were exempt from military service. Dyke Mills continued to thrive, but the post-World War II world brought new challenges. Where once the world had looked to Bradford for wool, now other countries offered stiff competition. Changing fashions too had an impact. At one time nearly all clothing was wool-based. The development of synthetic materials and a less formal attitude to dress meant that the demand for woolen suits and overcoats declined. Despite the Foster family's continuing investment in new equipment and the diversification into new textile products such as designing body hoods for Jaguar cars, things were not sustainable, and in 1989 the company went into administration. The mill was sold off with all of its assets, and today little evidence of its glory days as world leaders in textile production remain. But what was it like to work there? Let's hear some memories.
I don't actually know how I got into textiles. I think because my friends were working in the mill, that was just what you did. You just went to be with your friends.
It was my mum's fault. She said I had to go into mending because my dad had died, and you earned more money there than any other job.
I remember we had to be at work for 7:30. If you were late, they would lock the gates and keep you outside. Then they would dock your pay. I never liked being late. If you walked in late, you could feel everybody looking at you. It made you feel, I don't know, sort of ashamed.
We all had to sit in rows at the mending tables. We were like battery hens. I used to make up stories to tell the rest of the girls. Some were a bit rude. At least the money was alright.
It was okay, I suppose. We didn't get much when we were learning, and after that we were paid for what we did. The faster you worked, the more you got.
You could earn good money, as long as you weren't late and didn't nip out for a fag every 5 minutes. I started in 1958 and got £3 a week when I was learning. After that, I used to take home anything from £7 to £14, depending on the type of piece I got.
If you missed anything in the mending room, when it got down into the finishing, they used to fetch you down and you had to put it right. And they knocked it off your wage as well, so you made sure that everything was right before it left the mending.
Today, although some of the buildings are gone, the mill is still standing, and the spaces where once yarn was spun, woven and dyed are filled with a range of new businesses. These include a boxing gym, the bike mill, which provides parts and equipment for local cyclists, the Marshall's Music School, Mpika, a charity shop that raises money for an African village, the Black Dyke Mills Heritage Venue, which hosts concerts and community events, and Hovick Art Mania, Yorkshire's first indoor electric racing track for children. These are but a few examples of the many businesses that now call the mill their home. The current mill owners have plans to further develop the mill as a retail, leisure and visitor centre. The hope is that the buildings which lie at the heart of Queensbury and that have defined the village for over 150 years still have a big part to play in its future.